it'll be worth diving into the startup aspect, how it is to be a data scientist, especially like employee number 7 at a startup. But I think there are a couple of points that you raise are this is so rich. But there are a number of things I think that are worth highlighting for folks who are maybe listening as aspiring data scientists and trying to think their way through it, like how to think about product as a data scientist. I mean, you mentioned so many interesting things, including tight focus on one vertical. You guys were focused on baseball, even though that had, that wasn't the big picture. That's where you started.
Yeah.
And then building a very minimum viable product right out the gate that isn't, doesn't have all these bells and whistles. That's really user focused, something that meets a user's need without having complex neural networks in the back end. Can you speak to like how you guys iterated? Like, how did you know that this product was good enough without needing those bells and whistles? Did you put it in front of users, or how often did you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did. It's shifted a bit in the last 18 months as we're bringing on a new product, Lexio, it's sort of just come out in the last half of this past year, and it's the first time we've really been able to engage with actual users of our software. The people that are reading the stories we can talk about this more, but they can actually read the stories in Lexio, and we're starting to get all the metrics that you want to get of how many stories are they reading, what do they click on the most, how often do they come back, all of that kind of good stuff. But for a long time, we had to. We would write, like I mentioned, we write hundreds of thousands of Little League game recaps. We don't talk to anybody that reads those formally. We write it with a partner of ours called Game Changer. They know what their customers, what their readers are looking for, what they're most interested in. They work with us to sort of make sure the system is highlighting those. And then it goes out and the system, kind of does what writes those stories, but we haven't had a lot of like concrete feedback from the actual readers. It's been more working with our customers who are sort of can be an intermediary. But for us, the way we knew the content was good enough was pretty. It was pretty just looking at the stories. I mean, one of the things that's nice about what we do is we can mock things up pretty quickly. We know what our systems can do now. And because the final output is either text or text with some interactions and charts, a few charts on top of it, it's pretty easy for us to say, what if the software, what if the stories look like this? And we can go out and talk to people about, would you pay for this? What else is this missing? What things should be in the story that aren't here? What things are in the story that you don't care about? And we can get pretty concrete with users that way. Is one way we can hear from people. And this is probably a little far afield for right now, but one of the things we're really excited about with Lexio is we can start to, instead of us going to users and giving them a piece of paper or a screenshot and saying, if this were your story, how useful would this be? We can actually get that feedback directly from the app. And so we know what parts of the story users are clicking on the most. We give them little feedback tools to say, this was helpful, this wasn't helpful. And so now we're starting to get into a place where the system can actually improve itself and can write the kinds of stuff that users are responding to, more of that kind of information and less of the other kind of information that isn't resonating with people.
I find this especially interesting, just given that, so in my view, and this might be a controversial point, I think increasingly it's not, but I think I've been seeing data science move more and more in a bifurcated direction, where you've got some data scientists who are becoming product people, others who are becoming engineers, and others who are becoming business people. And you've kind of got this there's one job title, but really, you're going to be spending most of your time thinking about ways to build new product or whatever else. So in your case, I guess my first question is this something you see happening? And then I want to use this as an excuse to dive a little bit into, say, the things you look for if you're hiring in data science applicants as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, the bifurcation or trifurcation you mentioned there. I was just speaking with a friend of mine who is now applying and just got into some really great data science PhD programs. And a piece of feedback I gave him that I think is pretty generally applicable is he had a cover letter and statement of intent, that kind of stuff. And he was mentioning some of the new frameworks he'd used and how he'd built out, it was a paper that came out in August, and he was already leveraging some of those algorithms in this piece of thing he was doing. And he was, he's a super smart guy. It's super impressive that he was able to do that. That's awesome. And the feedback I gave him was, if this were on your resume, I would want to know what was so special about the problem you were trying to solve that only a model or approach that was 4 months old could tackle that.
Yeah.
Are you sure you needed that? There's probably an open source, some framework from 5 years ago that has a command line option that does something kind of close to that and gives you results that are mostly as good. And that's, you probably should use that. Like if you're doing personal projects, use the bleeding edge stuff. Like that's awesome. If you're trying to learn, like all those kinds of those projects are great for actually, implementing a new algorithm, like from a paper, like that kind of stuff is great experience. But when I actually think about someone being in their role in a day to day, I want them to use pretty standard tools that we know how to support, that other people in the team know how to use, that there's documentation for, that the company doesn't go away, all of that kind of stuff. And I think, at least for the business and product side, but even for the sort of more engineering minded data scientists, I think there's an idea that when you're a data scientist, you're a numbers person, and the numbers speak for themselves, right? And your job is to produce a model that produces numbers, or to produce some numbers, or to produce some piece of visualization or something. And that's kind of where your job ends, and you've done your part, and now let the business people take it over or kind of hand it off. And it's just that just isn't, it doesn't work. That isn't how people communicate. That isn't how ideas get spread. You don't sort of win by being right. You win by bringing everybody along with you.